This is Mayor Calhoun. Good morning. I am the second child of 12 children. I was born in Spanish Fort, and we were raised in a one-room and a two-room house. We had one bed. Some slept in the bed at night, and some slept on the floor. We rotated it. When I got old enough, my mother brought me over and we picked blackberries for the Malbus. Then when I got a little bit older, I worked in the laundry with my mother. Then a little bit older, I worked in the dairy. And then a little older, I worked in the house, and I walked from Loxley's to Malbus for 40 cents a day. We didn't have no running water, and we didn't have no lights. We didn't have no bathroom. My daddy would dig a hole in the yard and build a little house around it. That's where we had to go. No toilet tissue. We had to use any kind of paper we could find. We moved to Loxley, and my daddy farmed. And I remember, and this is my oldest niece, and I remember when she first started crawling, and we were living in Spanish Fort then. We had no hospitals, no medicine. My grandmother used to come from Mobile and go in the woods and get herbs, and we would all eat, drink herbs. She'd fix herbs for us, because we didn't have no hospital and no doctors. We had just used home remedies.
I'm Florence H. Rouser. I was born in 1926 in Spanish Fort, Alabama. My parents moved to Mississippi for a little while, but not long. We came back to Spanish Fort, and we moved from Spanish Fort to Baldwin County. But before we moved to Baldwin County, we stayed with my grandparents, on my mother's side. My grandparents took us in, and that's where I spent my first 2 or 3 years of life, back and forth with my grandmother. At the age of 2, I believe it was, I began to crawl. And when I started crawling, my Aunt Mary was in the kitchen cooking. She was frying pork chops, so she tells me. And when she's frying the pork chops, I had 2 uncles older than me, Hurlis and Robert, they were. And Hurlis came through the kitchen door, ran into Aunt Mary, and Aunt Mary spilled grease on him. When she spilled the grease on him, he was burned very badly. So my grandfather, at that time they only traveled to Mobile by ferry. My grandfather went to Mobile on the ferry and brought my great-grandmother back to his home. And when he got there, of course, since we didn't have any doctors and the hospitals were unknown to me at that time, naturally, but there was no hospital, so my great-grandmother started working on my uncle. And from then, as Aunt Mary has said, she went and she got herbs and oils and whatever she needed to doctor my uncle. And she stayed with my uncle until he was well, practically. Then she went back to Mobile. We moved to Loxley. My mother and father moved to Loxley, Bowen County. And when they moved to Loxley, my father was farming and chipping boxes. I don't know if you've heard of chipping boxes, but that's when they would pull the turpentine from the tree by hacking it and placing a cup to catch it. And he would chip the boxes and catch the juice from the tree and carry it to a still to be made into whatever they were going to use it for. So that took the first 6 years of my life. My father and mother built a house. They built a house, and Daddy would store his guns over the door. He had 2 rifles, and he would put those over the door. And that's where they would stay. There were 3 of us born at that time. My brother Mose, my brother William, and my brother Johnny. And we were, at the time that we were there, in that house particularly, my mother had to work, and my father worked. My mother came to Mabus. Mabus was in full bloom then. There was the dairy, the bakery, they had their own everything. The farm, the nursery, all of that, and there were different people over these different houses. So my grandmother worked in the big house, they would call it, and she worked for the Mabus family. And I believe there were about 6 or 7 of them in that house at that time. The mother and father and 3 sisters, I believe, and a brother. But anyway, my mother would come walk to the work in the morning, and she would leave around 6 o'clock, and she would come and work for Mabus, and around 4 or 5 o'clock, she would go back. So that was 6 miles in the morning and 6 miles in the evening. And that was her day. And she did all of that for 50 cents a day. I can't believe that now, but it was a fact. Aunt Mary would come and take care of us. There were 3 of us, while Mother worked and Daddy chipped boxes. He worked too, that was his job. And no water, no running water at that time. We didn't have running water. So we had to go to the spring to do whatever we had to do, like wash clothes, and Aunt Mary would come and take care of us. And at this particular day, Aunt Mary and Aunt Inez, which was next to Aunt Mary, came. They both came. And Daddy had built a house. He struggled, cut down the trees, made the boards, made the lumber, and built the house. The house was fairly new. My brother at that time, I was 5, my brother was about 3, and there was a baby, William. William was in the bed. And Mary took the clothes and went to wash. And she went to the spring, and like little boys are, full of wonderment and everything, Mose went to the wood box and he looked for matches. And of course he found the matches. And he knew what to do with the matches. So he struck a match and he put it to the wood box that was in the kitchen. We had wood stove and everything at that time. And it started a blaze. William was in the bed. He wasn't walking yet. He wasn't crawling, well, just barely crawling. And the box caught fire, and the only thing I knew to do at 5 was to run for Aunt Mary. So I ran to the spring to get Aunt Mary. And Aunt Mary came to the house, and she just did get my brother William out of the bed and out of the house before Daddy heard the gun, and he was in the woods, and he looks up and he sees the smoke, and he comes running. So the house burned down all the way to the ground. My dad, we lost everything. We lost everything. So we went back to my grandmother that was still in Spanish Fort. We went back there and we stayed until my parents decided what they were going to do, whether they were going to rebuild the house and everything, and what they were going to do. In the meantime, that same little boy that set the house on fire was lost. He walks away from the house in the evening after we had eaten dinner. He walks away from the house and he goes, he wanders. And of course, when he was wandering, the word got out that Moses lost. The whole community, white and black, all came together, got on their horses, got their guns so they could contact each other. And of course, they started looking. They looked from about 3 o'clock until it was getting dark. Everybody was getting panicky and all. And finally, they had made a pact with each other. If you find him, you go this way, you go that way, you go the other way. If you find him, shoot your gun or scream or holler or whatever you have to do to let the rest of us know that he's found. Okay. They went separate ways. Just about dark, you couldn't see anymore. We heard a gun. The gun shot, and the hoop went up. We have found him. We have found Mose. Okay, they found Mose at a hog pen, walking around as if he owned it, looking at the pigs, looking at everything. So they brought Mose back. Everybody went home and we celebrated and all because Mose was found. This little lost boy was found. Okay. Mother and Daddy decided, well, it's too much trouble for us to stay with my great-grandparents, so my parents decided that they would go back to Baldwin County, Loxley. Went back. My dad spent days cutting down trees, cutting them into blocks, about 12 to 15 long. And my dad and my mom did what they taught us to call riving boards. They had what was called a maul and a hack hammer. I guess that's what it was, a hack hammer. And they would put the blade into the board and hit with the hammer, and that would split the block. And they would do that until they had enough boards out of that particular block, and they would put that there. When they when they got enough boards from those trees and everything, then we built, my parents, I say we because we were all there together. My parents built a board house, what was called a log cabin. We had one room and a kitchen. And we all slept, they had three kids then, 4, because Johnny had been born. And of course, after Johnny was born, they decided to make me what is called a bunk bed. I cherish that thought today because today I see bunk beds being made, and my daddy did the bunk bed on the wall, built the steps and the board for the bed, and of course, I had to move. I was the girl, so I moved to the bunk bed. And I lived in the bunk bed. And then there were 3 beds in the house. One for my dad and mom, one for the boys, and one for me. And that's where we lived for the next 10 years. In that house that was built out of blocks, and we stayed there until we were getting too big to be close together like that. My mom and my dad felt, you know, the kids are getting big, we got to do something about this. So they did. My dad didn't get very much education. He went to school and he got so many licks and I don't mean physical licks, I mean licks otherwise, until he decided, I'm going to quit school. So he didn't get an education. But he was a smart man. He could build things, he could do things, and when he got ready to build a house, after my brother went to school and got a little education, when my dad got ready to build a house, he would tell my brother, I want you to put this down on paper. I'm going to need this to build a house, but I want you to put it down on a paper. And whenever you put it down, but my dad would have my brother to put the figures down, and then he would know the answer before my brother could write it down. He was just that good with his mind and everything. So he did that, and he decided, well, we are going to do something different. So we stayed in that house until my dad built another house. In my dad's lifetime, he built 2 houses for his family. But my grandparents then decided that they were going to come to Loxley, and they were going to be near, we were there together and all. And my dad and my grandfather, my dad chipped boxes, my grandfather worked at the nursery, my grandmother my great-grandmother was still in Mobile. My grandmother worked at Mavis. And when I got big enough, my first job as a young teenager was to make salads for Mavis restaurant. I was 12 years old, and they thought I was good at it. So I made salads, but that didn't last long because I didn't make very much. I didn't work for the 50 cents, but I didn't get what I think it was something like 15 or 20 cents a day or something like that. I don't know yet. But anyway, I was good at babysitting. I could keep children. And then I was, had my education, was growing too. I was in Baldwin County Training School in Daphne, Alabama, and I was a teen, well, I was past teenager because they took us only in the 7th grade. And that's what I did until college time. I babysat Mobile. They would hear about me and they would call me, and I would go to Mobile and work. I would go to Grand Hotel down in Point Clear and work for those families down there and all. Then I decided that I would go, my mom decided that I would go to college.
I was sitting here thinking about when we didn't have running water. We had to take our clothes to the branch and wash them. And Mom and them, my mother they would make quilts, and they were too heavy to wring them, rub them on the rub board. She'd put them in a big tub, and we'd get in there and stomp them with our feet until they got clean. We didn't know what a car was. We didn't see a car. The first car my daddy owned was a T model. And everybody was on horse and wagon, either horse and bag. We only had 3 months to go to school, and before we moved to Loxley's, we had to walk from on the other side of 31 to over on this side of 90 for school, and they had one little room and one teacher, and we all had to get in that one room for school. We had no hospitals, nothing. I'm the mother of 3 children, and one of my youngest daughter passed with heart trouble. And they all was born at home. All 12 of us was born at home because we had no hospital. I have a nephew that's come in a few minutes ago, and I must tell you this. When he was a baby, one of her sons, we toted him, I guess about 10 miles through the woods to the church to have him christened. We never went hungry. We never went hungry. We had no stoves. My daddy raised what we ate. We had no stoves, but we never went hungry. And then we thought it was good because we didn't have nothing to prepare it with. But when I look back over my life now, I thank God that He has made it so much better for us than was then, because my children was born in a little log cabin with just a kitchen and one bedroom, and then it seemed like we'd have nothing to compare it with. Like I say, we thought that was good. That was good. So we were all raised just about here at Malbus. I worked in the laundry with my mother. I worked in the house with my mother. I was managed at the motel over there till I got a job in Loxley at the Baldwin Wholesale Florist. And I worked there till about 30 years. But referring back, when I used to have to work in the house, maybe for 50 cents a day. And I remember one day this lady said she didn't have no money, but she had a dress that her daughter had been wearing. I think she said she wore it twice to school. So she told me, she said, "We don't have no money, can I give you this dress?" And I worked all day for one dress for my oldest daughter. And she was so happy. She thought she had something when I went home with that dress for her. And I was born April the 13th, 1915. I get a birthday next month, April the 13th. And I think I told you about, but this was a nursery here that my daddy used to, he run the nursery where this building's at. And I was working at the motel, and I got mad with him over at the motel, and I came over here, so I'm going over there and work with my daddy. And I went over there one day and come over here one day, and that work was so hard, I went right on back over there. I went right on back over there to the motel, and the manager was good enough to take me back into the motel. I worked at the laundry. I worked at the laundry. I worked at the dairy. We had a canning factory. I worked at the cannery factory. We had the Malbus had a chicken farm. They had they had horses. They had cows. I worked at the dairy. They had sheeps, and they had chickens, and they had I worked a little bit at the ice house. They had an ice house. I worked a little bit there. We had the laundry. We had to walk about a half a mile to the laundry. So they finally built the laundry at the house where we didn't have to walk that far and carry the clothes back and forward. They had a bakery in Mobile, and once a week they brought the clothes from Mobile, the laundry from Mobile over here, and we had to wash the laundry over there.
This is my brother Johnny, and Johnny is 86 years old.
86, yes.
Will be 87 in June. I'm a little bit older than he. I'll be 93 in May 17. But my brother Johnny he tells me about a Mary taking him and having him prayed for. He feels that that's a big part of his success in life, that he was prayed for when he was a baby, and he was carried so far, those 12 miles that he went, and there and back, and he feels that that's a part of his success. And who knows, we may feel the same way. But anyway, Johnny is the third brother out of 8. As Aunt Mary has said, the Malbus plantation afforded jobs for most of our family. And as she has said, the dairy, the laundry. My mother became the manager of the laundry after it was built. So that afforded me to go in and out, visiting my mother and helping in the house. And that's what I did. My grandmother worked for the Malbus for about 40 years. My mother, Aunt Mary, I heard her say she worked 30 years. And my mother worked, because she worked for both nursery and house. She worked when she worked for the nursery. That's when she would come night and evening and morning and spend all those hours back and forth. And she worked for the nursery when they built the laundry, which they had to do to help the workers and the places after they worked. The nursery and the dairy and all of those were separate entities from the big house. we called it. We called it the big house. And of course, they had, like Mary said, the Mabel's man was never there, but he was always in Greece, and from time to time, they would go back to Greece and then back to the United States and so forth. The Mabel's plantation afforded all of us jobs, and we were one big, great family. We were one family. We were definitely, I mean, when we hurt, they hurt. They would see that we had food. They would see that we had things that they would give them, like the bakery. We didn't have to buy that much bread and all. And when they cooked and so forth, they saw that we all had some. So we were a big family, and we worked together. And of course, in our early years, we had jobs because they afforded us jobs as teenagers and as children of the workers that were there and so forth. So we appreciated that, but there was never a time when we felt that we were anything other than a part of that big family. So we went to college. Most of us were able to go to college. My uncles, 2 uncles, went to the service, served in the military. My brother served in the army. My another brother served in the Navy, and this was Richard served in the Navy. Robert served in the army. He was an uncle. So this is where we are. Johnny decided he didn't want to go to college. He wanted to have his own business. So he first went to a plant and served in this plant for 20 years. Then he came out, and he and his sons provided carpentry contracting business. And that's where he has spent, I know, the last 35 or 40 years in that contracting business with his sons. And now he's retiring, and so am I. I went to college, and I finished in home economics and nursing. I had part-time nursing, and then I went to volunteer at school one day, and they begged me to go and finish my degree in home economics, so I went back and got home economics, and I spent 36 years in the classroom with children. And it has been a pleasure and a joy. And right today, those children don't miss a week. Some of them will call me. 1 or 2 of them will call me. So I'm blessed. I'm really blessed. And I think we all are, to have had the kind of, I would say, working relationships and that we have had, and are so blessed. So that's where we are. We can give credit to the Mabel's plantation for a big part of our family survival, and we can give, I would say, credit to our parents, our grandparents, because they saw to it that we really, really, really got what we needed. It may not have been what we wanted, but we got what we needed. And that's where we are.
My daddy was a fisherman, and he fished for a living, and he would catch the fish, and we'd get these big old catfish. He'd cut the head off them, and Mama would take the head and make us a stew, and he'd take the fish to Mobile. We didn't have the boats didn't have no motor. They had the oar 'em to Mobile, these little old boats. Take him all day, all night to get over there, to carry the fish to Mobile, and then he'd have to come all the way back home in that little boat. And that's where my grandmother lived in Mobile. And sometimes she'd get on that little boat and come back with us, spend a few days, and he'd have to get in that little boat and take her back home. And we ate whatever my mother cooked. We didn't have a choice like children do now. We ate whatever they gave us. We didn't have a dining room. My daddy built a table with some boards, and then he built some chairs with some boards, and we all had our place in the kitchen where we ate. And we didn't have china then. We had tinfoil pans and plates that we had to eat out of. Everybody had their own plate. Everybody knew their own place at the dining room to eat. And it wasn't, I don't like this and I don't like that. We ate whatever they gave us to eat. If it was nothing but peas and cornbread, that's what we ate. My dad would go, some of y'all might not know about possums and things. My dad would go in the woods at night and catch possums and eat. My mother would bake potatoes and we'd eat them. And when we worked on the farm, we didn't get no money. We got some of whatever we harvest. If it was potatoes, we got a sack of potatoes. If it was beans, we got beans. We didn't get no money for working on the farm. We just got some of whatever they harvest.
I'm sitting here now. I'd like to introduce you to my cousins, my cousin Sheila and my cousin Leroy. They are both beautiful and aggressive people, always doing something, always moving, always helping, and we are so thankful for that we have been, in our long years, we have been able to, I would say, be thankful and know that God is with us whenever we see these beautiful children at work.
Hi, my name is Sheila, and this is a very special day. This is my cousin Leroy. I am going to basically try to summarize or sum up some of the things that have been said here today. And first, I am so thankful to God that the sun was shining today, and that Aunt Mary, that will be 104 years old next month, was she was ready when I got to her house this morning. She was ready, she was all ready to go, and that was a blessing. And our cousin Florence that came in today from Bruton, Alabama, that she traveled in to be with her. These Aunt Mary, and they may have been said earlier, these are her two oldest nieces and nephews. And just to summarize a little bit about the family, you heard Aunt Mary mention a lot about Loxley, Spanish Fort. The family actually, their grandfather and grandmother resided in Mobile. Their grandfather was born, Aunt Mary, and I'm speaking of Aunt Mary. Aunt Mary's grandfather was born in Mobile, Alabama. And he later in life acquired property in Spanish Fort, Alabama. That land was deeded by President Theodore Roosevelt back in the 1906, I believe, was the date. However, he had been living on the property prior to that. And under an act that was passed by Congress, he was able to buy the land and they settled there, which is exactly where she was born. And without me even knowing it, and I think it's a God thing because of just faith and our belief, it's actually where my house sits now, which I had no idea when we bought the property that was the land that we were buying. And then in Loxley, which you heard them talk about a lot about Loxley, that property was actually bought on her grandfather's side of the family, on her mother's side, the Pollard side of the family, and that was 185 acres. When we were little kids, we actually played on Interstate 10 while it was being built. The stream that they talked about where they used to get water from, we've got pictures of our cousins swimming in that stream, which I'm not so sure we would do that today. We did a lot of crazy things, you know. We didn't think much as kids about the snakes in the wood. We didn't think much about what was in the woods, period. We just went in the woods and played. So we watched, I learned how to drive on the highway out there, you know, and I think just hearing the stories about Malbus and the Greeks, and I've talked to Tommy, which is one of the Malbus family members, and he said to me, I stopped by one day and he said to me, he said, you know, and he was in tears. He wanted Aunt Mary and Aunt Carrie, and Aunt Carrie transitioned last year. She was her sister. He said, you tell them to come and have tea cakes with me. And that was a big deal. You know, they would make tea cakes and drink tea together. And he said, you know what? He said, what people around here don't know is that we were family. You know, you hear the terminology plantation. A lot of people think it's just a perception, plantation, slavery. But no, there were no slaves. You have to go back to the population in this area. The Greeks migrated over here. They bought a lot of land. I look at the trees outside and I think Papa Son, her father, likely planted all these trees, you know, but they worked together. I recall, you know, Mama Kelly said, if I got on the floor, Miss Malbus got on the floor. You know, we worked together to build what we had to do to make this area very successful, you know. So Leroy, I was gonna try to get Leroy to say something, but he decided that he wasn't going to say anything.
I'm gonna say thank you.
And let me just say this about him, which you know, you look at all these generations that have come along, and where Aunt Mary went to church is actually where he went to school, and church is where he attends church today, which is Mount Aid, which is right down, Mount Aid Baptist Church, which is right down the street. So the seed has been planted. You know, we are godly people. We have many success stories in this family where people went on to do great things. We have those hidden heroes that even work at NASA, you know, different generations that have worked at NASA. The service to the military is phenomenal. Educators, teachers, you know, so they have contributed tremendously to the community and what the success in this community. And we thank you for allowing us this opportunity to document and put on record the very historical data of our family, which was one of the first families that landed on the soils here in Baldwin County, Alabama.